All right, everybody. Welcome to this week's lesson on integrated livestock management. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We're excited to have you. If you're, a weekly viewer, thank you for tuning in again. We're excited to have you. If you haven't seen the question in the live chat already, go ahead and respond to that. We are interested to hear what you have to say. Down below in our description, we have a link to donate if you're able to. And go ahead and like and subscribe to our page if you've been tuning in every week or if you are looking to hear more from us. So this week we're going to talk about integrated livestock management, and we're going to do something a little bit different. So normally you're used to Jeff and I sitting here, or myself and a guest sitting here discussing the topic. But this week we tried to pre-record a video and show you the content that way. That way we're going to connect you a little bit closer to Stratford. We're going to connect you to the land and the animals in a little bit more intimate way. That way you can kind of see what's going on. As we're playing that video, you'll be able to ask us questions. We'll be able to answer them. So that way, if anything is confusing or you want clarification on something, we can provide that in the text. And then we'll also be able to answer your questions at the end to provide a little bit more clarification. So we're excited for you all to learn today. And if you're watching afterwards, you're tuning in and watching our recorded video, we're excited for you to, see something a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show the schedule so you can see what we have coming up later for the rest of the summer. If there's any topic that is interesting to you, make sure you put that on your calendar, and we'll be coming at you soon. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the schedule.
Well, welcome. We're at Stratford Ecological Center today, and thought we'd try something different, get you in a different venue. We're going to be outdoors looking at what we mean by an integrated livestock system. And basically, we're in the loft here, and we're going to show you a little bit around the barn here, but we're going to take you out and show you what we need to manage an integrated system that has a variety of components to it. First of all, we're talking multi-species. All those species have different needs. We're talking about combining rotations of crop rotations and intensive grazing rotations. We're talking about combining a variety of tools and seeds and equipment to sort of combine the needs of not just the livestock but the farm. And we're talking about sort of integrating with nature itself in terms of using what nature is providing us to provide the needs of our system. So, as I mentioned, we're going to get you out here, but this is a beautiful spot up here. We're in the hay loft right now, one of my favorite vantage points, and we're going to be looking at the 8-year crop rotation we've got. We'll talk more about that when we get out there. We're going to show you our intensive grazing management system and what we're doing this time of year and how that changes throughout the year. And you can see we are a grass-based farm. Just about everywhere you look, you see we have grass. We have about 100 animal units total on this farm. And surprisingly enough, where you see all this grass, by mid-July in a normal year, whatever that is these days, I'm really struggling to find enough grass to graze. So that's when things get a little more intensive on the management side. And then we have a very diverse operation here. You can see we have a lot of paddocks here, but we also have a prairie. We have a pond system that we integrate with. You can see the clouds in the back. Which is a great asset for us. And you can see when we went by the equipment here that the variety of equipment is pretty intense, actually. But don't let that scare you. Integrated livestock systems don't have to be capital intensive, and you can actually bootstrap these things in. And it comes back to your goals. What is your intentions for production? And I always sort of fall back to the idea that you should start with your passions. You know, what are the animals that you like to work with? What's the size of the animal you like to work with? You trying to create income for the year all year round? Or are you sort of looking for a little add-on enterprise to do with whatever else you do in your lives? So it's a great opportunity. That's how I see it. It's something that you can really take advantage of at any level. Like I said, don't let the capital-intensive inputs that you need to start farming be your obstacle. Bootstrap it in and work with that. So we're going to walk over here to another favorite spot. I actually come up here, my favorite time of the year, oddly enough, is doing chores in the dead of winter. And during the dead of winter, these animals live in here. Typically this time of year, as you look over the side here, they're actually coming in early today because we're going to be heading into the 90s this afternoon. So they're doing their morning siesta. They've actually all been out grazing already since the crack of dawn. Some of the animals actually, when we have a moon like we did last night, will stay out all night long. It sort of depends on how strong the predator presence is. Lately it's been pretty light. I haven't heard coyotes in a while. So they were actually out last night grazing under the moon. So they're in here today to get shade, which is one of the main reasons I like this barn, is I get in sort of the center of things. I get to allow the animals to come and go at will. That's actually part of an organic certified system where they have to have access to the outdoors 24/7. We could actually close, as you can tell from this barn here, we can close these individual pens down and they still have their pen is outside. And integration can also happen in how you design your structures. I love this barn because, well, it was designed for kids. You can see there's walkways between the stalls for the kids to get up close. For the little kids, the larger kids, we actually get into the stalls with them and have a personal interaction there. But this is facing south. Most farmers that come in, they love this barn because it's open and airy, and they would not have a wall on the south side. And the design of this barn is actually set up to allow the sun during the winter solstice to reach the back of the stall. And livestock doesn't really need to be protected 100% from the elements. They need to be interacting with it all year round. It's the wind is their primary challenge in the winter months. The wind will chill them down very quick. And the air circulation actually helps us to maintain an environment that's healthy. Stagnant air, humid air, when you get this many animals into a barn, it actually starts to accumulate in the barn, and that's where the disease and the pathogens come in. So I'm very proud of this barn. This was designed by Jack Warner, who is one of our co-founders with Louise Warner and Gail Warner, to actually develop a barn that was based on his dairy experience, and he knew he didn't want that barn totally sealed in. Now, as we look at what's left here in the barn loft, hay-wise, I only produce half as much hay as I did in previous years, last year, because of climate change primarily. The last 3 years, I've been doing this for 40 years. It's been some of the worst grazing, haymaking, cropping years I've ever experienced in my life. And I attribute most of that to climate change. So, through a variety of hooks and crooks and buying a lot of hay too, and really managing the hay, I actually ended up, here we are, the first week of June, with a little bit of hay left, and I need hay year round. Some ruminant animals, in particular, the goats, but also the sheep and the llamas, which are just starting to head out right now, which, by the way, serve as guardian animals for us. They actually need that dry roughage on a daily basis. So I need hay year round, and we feed less of it. And on a normal day, I'll feed out a little bit, and I generally kick them out of the barn, close the gate, and force them to stay outside. Now, when it's hot like it's going to be here today and tomorrow, I let them come and go at will. Alrighty, so here we are with the hogs, and this is Tansy. She was a gift to us, and actually I've been working hogs for quite a while in my life, and she's the first one that I do not trust. So we're not going in with them right now. I'm actually getting ready to separate them totally. Part of this system involves a creek where I can work the piglets, quote unquote. They're not so small anymore. But here's another example of 3 examples of what we call integrated livestock management. Ultimately, these hogs are going to go on pasture. The problem with pasture is they have a great ability to destroy it as they're in there. So you got to manage it tightly, or decide you're going to totally replant an area that you put them into. So that's part of the system. The other thing about integration of the system is that with hogs in particular, you have a variety of resources to work with. This is what's left of some of last year's corn, and this is some vegetables that we've harvested out of our greenhouse that we've used year round, and they're omnivores in the purest sense. They eat anything. There are a few things on the list, and we'll get into that now, that are not good for them, sort of like our dogs and cats that we shouldn't give them. But they're real fond of anything, so this is one of the ways we sort of attract the animals. When we want to pull them into the creek, we actually will feed them into the creek. Mama can't get through. That's what a creek is. It keeps the adults out. And so that's one of the aspects of an integrated system, is that we can sort of use resources as they become available throughout the season for a variety of ways and reasons. I can actually throw hay in here, and they'll make what's left into bedding. So that's the way I can conserve on buying bedding. Basically, in our integrated system, all the resources we use for raising livestock are here on the farm. The only thing I bring in is soybean. And the reason I don't grow soybean is we have very cold and heavy soils, heavy clay. They're very difficult to grow organically. We are an organically managed farm. So it's an opportunity, again, to use the resources that are here. This is spelt, one of our mainstays in our rotation. It's actually a very favorite crop. This is Lightning, a llama. She's not used to eating out of a hand. No, she's not going to do it. Yeah. This is actually a Tunis sheep crossed with a Shetland. And again, integration in my mind means taking advantage of hybrid vigor. And so Shetland's a very small breed, but has a high quality fiber. The Tunis are actually well known for their meat quality. We actually have a very popular product. We do sell our meat here from the freezer, and it's processed up at DJ's in Fredericktown. A very fine processor, by the way. And it's actually, these animals are generally very skittish. This individual right here happens to be friendlier because she was part of a project called Livestock years ago. Michael Purcell. When he was a professor there, he was actually the chair there. Came up with this project where he monitored Shetland sheep, which he owned. He brought back and forth here at Ohio State. We had at night and day, and we would go around, and his whole idea was to bring the sheep back to Ohio State campus. So this is a Toggenburg. She's actually a little gimpy right now. You want to come up? What's nice about the Toggenburgs is they're multi-species, or not multi-species, but multi-purpose. They're actually a great dairy breed. Yeah, she's hurting. She's got a bad foot in the front. You don't want to come up? You want to come up? There you go. Yep, there she goes. Finally decided to get up. Great milking breed, but also a good meat breed. They're a little more adapted to cooler climates than what we're getting these days. You're hungry, aren't you? And they're actually quite personable too. Let's go over and see if we can draw a few more in. The llamas, by the way, are our guardian animals. Right? I mentioned that before. Their stature, they talk, they stomp. They'll actually charge a coyote if they have to, but the first step is to always get in between the predator and the prey. And, so we got a variety of goats here. This is they're known for being earless, and she's got a couple girls on her this year. Yeah, you like that too? All right, we got to share. So, integrated systems again. Watering. We have water systems, redundant water systems, 2 wells. We have indoor for the barn, and we have outdoor tanks. We used to put float valves on them, but they became too high maintenance. So it actually gives us a reason to go out and check the animals every day, to go out and fill tanks on a daily basis. This is Dumbo. Dumbo was bottle fed. He's a yearling now. He gets to stay. He is a wether, which means castrated. He's no longer going to be a daddy. And then our cameraman is getting visited by Legend, who's the daddy of all these kid goats. All right. So again, diversity. These darker color, that's still Toggenburg. Again, we got the Tunis, multi-purpose. The goats are multi-purpose too, also. So let's go out, take a look at some fields. Alrighty, so we can't be neglectful about probably the most important piece of this integrated system. That's soil management, soil health. And we're an organic system. And a living soil where the entire soil food webs have worked and working for us, despite what Mother Nature's been throwing at it lately. With all this rain, we've actually experienced a lot of negative things. Not so much temperature yet, but the rain has really slowed things down for us. This is probably what represents some of my best pasture I've got working for me this year. It's very diverse. We've got some white clover, which is actually a very positive style. We got the red clover. We got some alfalfa and orchard, and we got a new grass. Some of this stuff that's filtered to us here. That's been actually a savior for me the last couple of years. It's called Fesculolium, which is a hybrid of perennial rye and it's a meadow fescue, and it's actually what's the beauty of it is you can do nothing more than scratch the soil, which is all I've been able to do with the way the weather's been. Broadcast it over. Sometimes, depending how well it settles into the soil, you might want to scratch it in again with spike tooth arrows, what I use. Let it germinate, and get just even 2-3 inches tall, and you can actually start to graze it. And the beauty of it is it has such a strong crown and a deep root system that you can graze it down to nothing, which I've had to do a lot of this last couple of years, and it actually comes back, and it's become one of the livestock's favorite things to eat. They actually go looking for these little pieces of grass that are sort of scattered about throughout here. So like I said, this is a good example of a good mixed pasture. Yeah, keep in mind we have an 8-year crop rotation. 4 years of rotation is in a crop like corn, oats, spelt, and then I get to play around with the 4th year. Those are spread out every 2 years in that 8-year, and then 2 years in the rotation is always put in either hay, pasture, combination of for what I call a rest period to sort of keep things going. Calcium is another sort of downside to what I've been seeing in soil health. Calcium is a major driver in organic soils. And I used to be able to, when I first worked this farm, we have what we call base saturation in calcium, a goal of 75%. And when we first came here, it was down around 35%. The rotation, the organic matter turnover, which is, again, probably the most important driver, organic matter, we were able to move that up to the 75% base saturation level. And I didn't have to lime or anything. I didn't put fertilizer, calcium, anything on the soil other than the rotation, and was able to maintain that 75% base saturation. Now with these record rains, the hard rain events, the anaerobic environment, the strong leaching of calcium off the surface and back into the ground water, I'm losing the battle on calcium. And I'm also losing the battle on organic matter. What's surprising is places like the rainforest, one of the most humid tropic environments in our world, has actually very little organic matter, if any. And you would think as lush and full as that is, it would have tons of organic matter, all that litter hitting the ground. Because of the temperature and the soil quality and the porosity of the soil and the sort of hungriness of the soil microbes, they gobble up every bit of that organic matter that's in that soil. So it's a constant balancing act. And what makes this farm unique, and I don't know many farms that are like this, but hopefully it's catching on because I think it's a good idea, is not only are we have a crop rotation, we have an intensive grazing rotation system that is on top of each other. And the beauty of that is not only am I maintaining soil health, is that I can have a bad year in corn, which is pretty common for me in organic systems, and at the very least, most of our fields are fenced in, I can go out and graze that corn and get some fodder and benefit from it. A lot of people sort of downplay the role of livestock in agriculture. And for those who do that, I strongly encourage them to read a book by Alan Savory called Holistic Management. Basically, it speaks to the idea that the hoof action of animals, not just domestic animals, but wild animals, in addition to their patterns across the landscape, can actually, and the sort of the assistance in planting seed and creating aeration in pockets of moisture where the footprints are on them, helps to regenerate the ecosystem, the environment in these soils that are. We rotate animals around. When I have a lot of grass, I'm grazing them in the entire 5-acre paddocks that I have. When we get hotter, I'm already prepared to break this down into 4th size paddock with temporary fence, which we put up, take down, and move. We use solar fence chargers to keep the animals contained. Another point of integration is the ability to use renewable energy as we manage our farms. And sun has been a great asset. In fact, this farm itself produces 90% of its own energy through solar energy. And the fencers are just a great little tool that I can add to that process to demonstrate how powerful and wonderful the sun can be in a sustainable, regenerative, integrated livestock system. So, this is the next feast coming up here. We got rye in this rotation over here. This is actually on the other side of this field is rye that's coming into seed. Original intention a year ago was I planted it to oats with an orchard alfalfa. Oats serves as a nurse crop. I harvest the oats as hay during the dough stage, and then ideally when you harvest that hay, that oat hay, you'll see the orchard and alfalfa grass already germinated and growing. Well, it did stop raining until the end of June last year. I did manage to get the oats in, but then we went to immediate drought. And the soil was so compacted that the oats never got more than like 6 inches tall. So there was really no hay to be had, and just forget about the crop I was really going after, the orchard and alfalfa. So what I did is later in the season, when we started getting cool again, is I replowed it, plowed everything down, and planted it in rye. Rye is a wonderful crop because it has a lot of allelopathy. It actually helps to suppress the weeds as it's nursing the crop you want, which for us is hay. Again, we're a grass-based farm. The concept that I can't push enough. So, let that mature, seed. Actually, I'm going to go to dough stage again. It's going to be harvested as soon as hay. I actually put down a cutting of hay this year already. It was not supposed to rain for 2 more days, and sure enough, it rained in half the time that I needed to dry it. So I've actually lost the first cutting already. But I'm very happy to say that I've got a lot of annual to sort of produce the hay I need. In fact, I'm redesigning myself as we speak, and always thinking of a way to produce an annual crop of a cereal grain of some type that I can use as hay if all else fails. So I can point while we're here, this beautiful vista of the pond and those little gourds you see all the way down there. They are purple martin colonies, and last year we had, I think, over 37 families that reside there. I'm sad to report that this year they came early because we had that early warm-up, and then we had that late cold snap. And the purple martins do not like that cold snap because it destroys their feed, which is insects. And normally in a wet spring, insects are emerging and very abundant, plenty of food, but essentially the cold snap and combined with the rain had prevented them to get after the insects. So everything cycle, hopefully the cycle will change, and we'll see them back in large numbers this year. But along with in front of those is a prairie, another ecosystem, a micro ecosystem. Tree swallows and bluebirds have a variety of homes that they can reside in there, and if we had time to actually see the cattle, you can actually see them from here in one of the fields. Most of the time here I'm keeping cattle and small livestock separate because they graze different things. Cattle will graze down to the ground just like sheep will. Goats not so much, but they will too. But the cattle are heavy grass eaters, and the sheep are more broadleaf eaters. And so I generally put cattle into a pasture first, and let them sort of clear the good stuff. They need more nutrition than the smaller animals, or more quantity, I should say, not quality. And then I bring in the small livestock sort of behind them, and the sheep will actually go with the broadleafs that are left behind. Another consequence of all this weather has been I have broadleaf weeds everywhere, plantain, dock, sorrel, and I mean it's just I have this year it was the wild petunia. I've never seen so much wild petunia, and none of that is for So I'm actually, for the first time in my 30 years of farming, 40 years involved in the field, but it's the first time I'm replanting almost every pasture as a consequence of this climate change that we've all been experiencing. So let's take a little walk and get a closer look at some spelt. Okay, so this is spelt. Back right in front of us is an example of a drowned out area that we've had in a variety of places in this field. Favorite crops, it's one of the strongest, I think it's even stronger than rye in terms of allelopathy, or its ability to suppress weeds. And underneath this spelt, it's probably a month away from harvesting yet, which we're going to harvest this hay this year, again in dough stage. Underneath this spelt is a Timothy clover hay that's developing slowly. Normally when I harvest to maturity, which is when I go for the grain, we no longer have a combine here. As soon as I take that grain off the top, there's a Timothy and clover hay or pasture field which is ready to be used. Cut. So it's a wonderful crop. Grain is wonderful grain. I was on the barn there, I feed it whole grain to the livestock because it still has the hull of the beard, and I love feeding it this whole grain because it actually helps to scour and condition the root before stomachs that moves through the system. So it's nutritionally superior to any other grain I'm aware of. So many things. So big spelt apple. So this crop, in addition to the grain, hay is going to be wonderful. We're very fortunate to have that. Actually, the hay of this becomes of our livestock feed. We only feed to hogs and chickens. Sometimes I feed it to milking mothers or to young animals that are struggling, sort of getting a start, solid start. But like I said, we're grass-based, so all of our animals, 99% of their diet is grass. So, but we do raise hogs. I have raised hogs completely on pasture before. It's very possible. It just takes longer. The animals are very thrifty and very vigorous. And we went to process them for meat, and we got some nice bacon, good looking, very lean looking bacon, very little fat. Put it in the skillet and it wouldn't fry. There's not enough fat to fry it, so we had to bake it, and so it was an interesting experiment. I don't do that anymore. I feel like it's pushing them a bit much. So chickens and hogs both need some grain, but our chickens only get, I say, no more than 50% of their total diet is in grain. The rest is in grass and insects. So what's nice about this knoll up here is we can point to some other integrations with this livestock system. In this field here, I just, not more than a week ago, put in a Sudan sorghum, another annual crop that I can either graze. We're outside of the main pasture system, but I can't run temporary around that and graze it. I'll probably opt for hay, again, since the hay season started off rough. And I'm actually doing for the first time a different type of cultivation system for some new fields. I normally do a deep tillage to get the organic matter down. I'm trying to build organic matter and topsoil level down as deep as I can. Again, the weather has prevented, the soil was so compacted that it was not drying out. And as a farmer, I get antsy and I want to get some things done. So I threw the rototiller on, which is ours is only a 5-foot wide rototiller. I did shallow tillage, which a lot of farmers actually use in an herbicide-based system. It's a very, I'm always impressed how they can go with one pass and have a beautiful looking field. Of course, the herbicides are keeping the weeds down. I'm normally breaking ground in sod, but I don't use a moldboard except for maybe once in 8 years because it creates that hard pan. So I experimented with shallow tillage, rototiller. It takes a while to do it with a 5-foot tiller. And then I broadcasted that seed, and then I cultipacked it, which was basically pressing the seed into fluffed up soil to get a better contact with the soil. So the cows are still out on that. My fear is that the weeds may take over. We're due for 1.5 inches rain here in the next few days, so that can change things too. I did the same thing if you want to pan the other way. We in the field over there where the interns are right now. I just planted corn in there last night. That was a neat field because it was clover. Clover's my favorite field to grow corn into. And the reason we normally, these fields that we're sitting next to right is what we call a vegetable field. We normally grow about 100 to 200 tomato plants, but every year for the last 5 years at least, we've got into late blight. And late blight, once you have it, it's sort of like foot rot. It's one of those things that never disappear. So my strategy is to put it on the other side on a fresh field that's never seen vegetables, that has probably higher fertility than what this field has, is to put those tomatoes over there to avoid the late blight. And then the field over there towards the greenhouse, it's actually the same sort of scenario and cultivation here. Again, you can see some weeds coming in there, but what I do is that's a buckwheat. One of the best nectar producers we can plant, very high, very productive. And we run bees here too. So we want to talk about livestock. Most of us consider our bees livestock. They're very much managed. They're in the system. We couldn't do what we do in field crops, vegetable crops, any of it without the honeybees. So that's another concept. So I like to leave you with sort of some key points. Again, grass-based integration is a very multi-dimensional concept. The idea that we can start farming in a livestock farm without a lot of capital input, a lot of sweat equity, and a lot of seed. Your primary cost should be seed. A rototiller is fairly easy to get on a small farm. Fencing can be very simple. And the idea is that you're not just paying attention to the livestock, to the potential for other enterprises, like these blackberries behind us here, and the corn we grow for livestock can be used as mulch, the stalk of the corn stalks. And so there's great opportunities for anybody interested in starting a livestock operation on a small scale to either supplement or even as a lifestyle to be your primary income.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I'm sure at some points the sound was a little bit touchy because of the wind. We are really dedicated to providing you guys the content and the knowledge to get started in farming. And so we're continuing to learn ourselves, and we hope that you all are able to continue to learn as well. And hopefully we continue to better ourselves and provide you better content in the future. So we're going to keep going until 5 o'clock. So Jeff and I are going to chat here for a little bit. I wanted to ask Jeff to kind of like summarize, wrap up what we talked about in the video, just for anybody that may have missed some of the topics because of the wind and things like that. So Jeff, can you talk a little bit more, kind of bullet point what we talked about in the video?
Sure. Yes, we started off talking about setting your goals and how we get started. I was trying to sort of highlight the fact that it doesn't take large amounts of capital to get going. This is a very bootstrappable operation. It should be sort of catered to the people and the persons that are going to be managing these operations, their desires for the different types of livestock. It doesn't have to be large scale, and it could be small scale. It could be a lifestyle thing. It could be a business thing. So it's important that you set your goals before you move forward. And then we started talking about sort of the integration of the cropping system and the importance of soils in these systems. The soils really drive the whole thing, bottom line. And in a grass-based system, actually the grass-based system creates a lot of opportunity for you to build your own fertility without a lot of inputs. As I mentioned in the video, we bring in very little inputs. In fact, we make a lot of compost. I don't even use that compost in my field crops or in my pastures. I use that compost totally for our horticultural crops and for our landscape, which is a lot of edible landscaping. So the 8-year crop rotation, in my opinion, weather aside, is very sufficient to manage those systems. The importance of calcium and organic matter, the management of those, how important that is. And then we started talking about sort of specialty relationships between livestock, how they graze, the types of things they graze, how they interact. And then we talked about the sort of the challenges of maintaining livestock systems with climate change and how I'm sort of modifying my system. And that's probably another good take-home point as we move into a grass-based agriculture, especially in the context of climate change, how we need to continue to be evolving and adapting to the conditions that Mother Nature is presenting to us, because we have ultimately need to figure out a way to make it work.
Right.
So.
All right. So it definitely seems like if you've been tuning in, you recognize that setting your goals is probably one of the most important things. Getting started as an agriculturalist, as a farmer. And even to the importance of soil, and we continue to, re-emphasize the importance of soil in your goals throughout each of our videos. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking some more like situational questions. So let's say I have 5 acres of land, and I want to really emphasize like having a closed loop system, which is really essential, I think, in an integrated livestock management program. How many heads of goats and sheep might I want to start out with? Fencing, how much fencing should I provide based on that amount of land? Kind of what are your thoughts there?
Well, my thoughts are primarily to start slow.
Yeah.
First of all, 5 acres is not a lot of land, and especially if you just started on that land,
Yeah.
You need a context of what that land's capable of. Of course, you're going to want to soil test and get some sense of its productivity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, generally on a per acre basis, you're talking 1 to 2 cows max on an acre basis. And I forget what the ratio of goats or sheep to cows are. It's like 5 or 7 to 1,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I'm sure someone out there could give me an exact number. But so you're better off to start small, start slow, 5 acres, and immediately think about establishing a healthy grass-based system.
Mm-hmm.
And I would immediately be thinking up of a temporary fencing system with like a perimeter fence that was permanent,
Mm-hmm.
and then a temporary fencing system within that 5 acres
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to be nimble and move around between paddocks. As you evolve with that, you can actually take those smaller, say 1 acre, quarter acre paddocks that you'd be creating with temporary fence,
Mm-hmm.
and establishing them in a small scale in different types of forages, like fesculolim, for instance. Again, I'm very amazed and impressed with the crop, its ability to regenerate, and how much the livestock like it.
Mm-hmm.
So start small. I would start with animals that are actually referred to you. You actually know a farmer
Yep.
that has raised the breeds that you like.
Mm-hmm.
Get to know their history, especially their vet history,
Mm-hmm.
and their birthing history, and sort of evolve from information that's already been established by other farmers.
Sure.
And then use those farmers as a resource to sort of figure out what are the better seeds, seed
Mm-hmm.
sources, timing for planting seeds, clipping methods, regeneration or renovation of pasture, what's
Mm-hmm.
the sort of techniques to use for those things. Because in a 5 acre system, you're going to be very, very intensively managed.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned soil testing. What type of soil tests do you recommend? I know there's like the Albrecht method and then just testing for like NPK. What's kind of your experience with soil testing? How frequently? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean the problem with the Albrecht method, in my mind, and it gives you some trends and some directions to go with that. Um, for me, the issue has been that it's so sensitive to uh, the variation within a landscape.
Okay.
That you can get a reading in one section of land
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily correlate with what another reading you're getting in another
Okay.
section of land. So I've been relying to a more standardized test,
Mm-hmm.
but how I interpret and read that information is very different.
Okay.
I'm focusing on organic matter, number one. A lot of tests actually do not test organic matter.
Right.
So I require that in the tests that I take. As I mentioned in the video, calcium's a major driver for me.
Mm-hmm.
Calcium's a major driver of biological systems. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at some relationships and ratios of calcium to magnesium.
Okay.
Looking at my cation exchange capacity, or the soil's ability to exchange and hold nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for tilth, so the loaminess of the soil. I'm looking for the ability of the soil to drain well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the living side of it, looking for stable humus, and I'm looking for the soil aggregates that form within the soil. And those are the things you try to preserve as you work soil. So organic matter, calcium, nitrogen, I always want to know, but you need to understand that through a season, it's a very dynamic nutrient.
Right.
And it gives you some sense of what's been moving through already. And if you have a living soil, the beauty of that is you have sense that most of that nitrogen is coming from your own organic matter sources.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it's more about interpretation of a standard test versus taking an alternative test.
Sure. So, I know you mentioned like planting seed to help foster a pasture for livestock. I know when I was first getting started raising boer goats, we planted mainly alfalfa. Is there like a preferred seed mix that you'd recommend to someone getting started if they had just purchased the land and they know that they need to plant some seed?
Yeah, I would not look for any single sort of kind of seed. The grasses versus legumes. Generally, a high legume mix is not good for most livestock.
Right.
So I'm looking for a blend of both legume and grasses,
Mm-hmm.
and preferably you have like a four-way mix.
Sure.
Of two different types of legumes,
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 different types of grasses. You're looking for a seasonality of grasses. You got cool season grasses and you got warm season grasses.
Mm-hmm.
The clovers tend to establish better when planted in the winter or late fall,
Mm-hmm.
or even early fall. The alfalfas tend to do better early spring, but they can also be established. And then sort of maintaining that over a long period of time without the weeds sort of coming in and taking over.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where it's good to know your sort of local resources,
right.
In terms of a good seeds person,
Mm-hmm.
And get great recommendations, and then talk to the local farmers. And if you could find local seed,
Mm-hmm.
that's like premium in my mind.
Yeah.
Seed that's already adapted to our soils and to our weather, our seasons.
Sure. So kind of switching gears from soil and like planting and whatnot, let's say there's already a strong presence for like meat production in my area, and I know that might not be the best market for me to get into. Would you recommend, an alternative market for me to look into for my market animals, even though I'm relying on these farmers for to buy the animals, or even to like for their knowledge and whatnot moving forward? So like, let's say most people are producing meat. Would I want to go into dairy instead? Or should I just look for like a new market?
I think, there's only so many things an animal can do.
Right.
So, and it goes all the way from recreation
Mm-hmm.
to wellness,
Mm-hmm.
to therapy, goat yoga.
Yeah.
Land near a metropolitan area and do goat yoga.
Yeah.
But generally you're talking food and fiber.
Mm-hmm.
And within food, we got meat and dairy. And the things that seem to be, maintaining a pretty strong market hold are those that have specialty products like sheep milk,
Right.
sheep milk cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Goat milk's holding up pretty well.
Yeah.
I would not want to be a dairy cow farmer right now with the way the prices of milk are going. But, you start getting into the A2 proteins.
Yeah.
And there's some real great things going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I would tend to look for breeds that sort of cover a couple areas.
Okay.
It's another reason why I like the tunas. They have a medium to a higher, slightly higher than medium quality wool,
mm-hmm.
that are real high quality meat. And for a small beginning operation, the Shetlands and the tunas are both nice sized sheep.
Mm-hmm.
To physically manage without having to have large facilities to hold and to work the animals. So,
sure.
So multi-purpose, and I think a little ingenuity goes a long ways.
For sure. I know I previously mentioned I had a boer goat operation when I was growing up, and we didn't always sell for meat. We would sell to 4-H'ers to bring it to fair. I know goats were really popular from where I'm from, and they continue to gain popularity, throughout the state. It seems like here in Ohio. So I think that was a pretty a smart, market for us to use.
Well, it's the #1 meat in the world that's consumed.
Is it goat?
It is goat.
Yeah.
And so again, in markets, you got to maybe seek them out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're set up that you would allow for a Hillel type slaughter,
mm-hmm.
That's something that people are willing to pay dearly for.
Yeah.
Hit the right population for the market you have.
Sure. So we have about 8 minutes left. I want to make sure you guys remember to ask questions. If anybody has any, pressing questions that we can answer right now, we'll continue to chat. If, no one thinks of anything, that's okay. What are some additional thoughts, for getting started that you think people might want to know?
Well, so for someone who wants to get started from the beginning in terms of developed knowledge, there's a lot of great opportunities worldwide for people to get experience in livestock production.
Sure.
Versus going whole hog head first into doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it actually does help to have experience before you make any kind of investment.
Mm-hmm.
It's livestock rearing can actually be a messy business on a variety of levels, and it's a 24/7 job.
Absolutely.
It's not like horticultural crops or field crops where you plant them and you can actually take a vacation.
Yeah.
It's a daily thing. So I think you should personally experience that before
mm-hmm.
you get into these types of systems. The rewards, once you get through that and that you are convinced that that's sort of a way to go, they're endless. There are tremendous opportunities for relationships and sharing relationships around livestock and animal welfare as a regenerative, sustainable, ethical, ecological type farmer of meat products, which sounds sort of antithetical, but I feel it's our responsibility to provide the greatest quality of life that we can for these livestock.
Absolutely.
I always show appreciation for it, and so it's there's some sort of conscientious and sort of philosophical issues you need to sort of work through before you, like I said, go head first.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's a big question I feel like people always have with getting into meat production. Some people say meat is going to be no longer like a thing, in so many years. What do you have to say about that idea?
I think it's probably going to be more and more true that we are going to head that way
mm-hmm.
as a species. we certainly have to steer away from the types of meat that we're used to now.
Right.
There are so many downsides to so much collateral damage that's sort of associated with the large-scale, concentrated types of meat production.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of, I mean, as a species, we developed as hunter-gatherers. There's certain actually essential fatty acids that we can only get through meat, but not just any meat. It has to be meat that's raised on the food that meat was intended, or that animal was intended to eat.
Right.
Conjugated linoleic acids, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get that any other way
Yeah.
than an animal that grazes grass.
Right.
Bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Yet it's an essential fatty acid to the species, us.
Yes.
So it's essential for them too. So, so I think animal husbandry, livestock production will always be with us. It's just sort of how we use it, how we raise it, how we concentrate it, or not.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the issues that evolve first. Sure, I mean, I personally couldn't imagine just going to the Soylent Green route, you know?
Yeah.
But we are obviously an evolving species too.
For sure. So we have about 4 minutes left. We haven't gotten any questions. Do we have any final thoughts, I guess?
Well, it's actually when I got into animal farming, livestock farming, it was serendipitous. I originally got into agriculture thinking I would just be a gardener, and it was for that very reason we talked about. Livestock is a 24/7 job.
Right.
And I like to travel. I like to see and do other things. I like to be able to leave the property now.
Mm-hmm.
And but having come full circle and just life circumstances got me into livestock, I don't regret it for one moment. And it could be a wonderful, gratifying career for a lot of people. And I would strongly suggest, if you have an inkling at all towards clean, animal welfare driven, sustainable, regenerative livestock production, I see the future and the opportunities for that. It'd be only right.
Yeah, absolutely. I know as I've continued to learn and grow in regenerative agriculture with my knowledge, I have definitely had conflicted views about animal agriculture. There's so much negative talk, I feel like, in the media that we have to deal with internally ourselves as agriculturalists. And so I continue to find out more and more about how animal agriculture can be done correctly and how it can be continually beneficial to the environment, not only as something that degrades the environment around us, which is what we so commonly hear. And definitely integrated livestock management continues to provide excellent closed-loop system practices for our farms. Raising animals provides excellent compost and nutrients for our gardens and our plants that we're able to grow, which continues to benefit the environment around us. So
Exactly.
I think it's definitely important for us to continue to remember that and to come to terms with it, as we grow and learn throughout, our process. To wrap up, we have about 2 minutes left. I wanted to see, are there any additional resources you want to provide to people? I know you mentioned the holistic management in our video, but is there anything else that you feel like someone might be able to look into to learn some more?
Well, I mean, to get into the inner minds of an animal's brain. Temple Grandin is just a wonderful read and a wonderful sort of approach to animal, not right, but care. That they are very empathetic beings themselves.
Sure.
And it gives you great insight in terms of how we should be approaching them and how they want to approach us. So I would strongly recommend that. David Kline is the name of the of the publisher of Farming, magazine that's produced here locally. He waxes poetic on a number of his interactions with his animals, both currently and in the past. And There's some great anecdotes in there. I appreciate the writings of another one that we lost, Gene Logston, his relationship with livestock through time. So yeah, I would tend to, if I was to get into this and wanted to find a sort of a heartfelt reason to get into it, I would tend to get into those writings of Wendell Berry and our relationship with people and animals on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for those resources. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for tuning in today. If you missed the beginning of our segment, remember to like and subscribe to our page so that you can continue to be reminded of what's going on. Next week, we will do an introduction to gardening and greenhouse management if you didn't see our schedule. So that'll be definitely pretty fun, and we'll continue coming up with new content to provide to you guys so that you can continue to learn and engage with what we're doing at Stratford and what you're doing at home as agriculturalists yourself. So make sure you tune in next week if you're able to. Thank you.